Okay, so I promise I'll be brief. Just a little bit about Ivalua to start. So Ivalua, if you aren't familiar with us, they're a source-to-pay provider. So we've been in this space for about 20 years, recognized by pretty much every industry analyst that you've heard of before. For example, Gartner were recognized as a leader in their Magic Quadrant for source-to-pay. Now, a little bit more about Ivalua. So about 20 years old, we're about 1,000 people that we work globally. So we have 16 offices globally. So a very global company. We also have customers from around the world. Some of the biggest brands, some of the biggest companies, some of the most complex implementations that you've ever heard of. That doesn't mean that Ivalua is only for big, complex organizations, but we do have a lot of those. So a little bit about the solution itself. So as a source-to-pay provider, Ivalua covers everything from supplier relationship management, sourcing, contract lifecycle management, and of course, e-procurement and P2P and spend analytics. In addition, we also have recently introduced intake orchestration as a solution as well. Now, Ivalua's real claim to fame is really built on two premises. One is configurability. It's a very flexible platform. And number two, our unified data model, which is really important in the world of agentic AI as we move forward into the future. Because we think it's really important, which you'll probably hear me say about 5 times in the next few minutes, as we move forward, that you have access to really good data and it's available to you wherever you are in your procurement process. All right, so that's my quick intro. Maybe we can bring everybody back.
Put you out of your misery. You can have a seat and we'll bring everyone else on. So joining Doug now, we have David Wild and Trevor Lunga. Please give them a warm hand. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll keep it simple. A bit of context to start. Doug will spare you, having just spoken, let you have a water break. Let's go down the line. David and Trevor, maybe just a brief intro to yourselves, your role and responsibility, and maybe a top line of what's on your radar when it comes to technology and what we're talking about. David.
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, we're going to use our outside voices because the sound here sucks. So just so you know. So David Wild. I lead digital procurement for a company called Schneider Electric. It's about a 40 billion euro company that manufactures electrical products. My background is a little bit weird. I come from Amazon. I'm a software developer, but I happen to have done procurement for 20, 30 years. So my biggest passion is all about data and how do we use technology so that procurement professionals can make better business decisions.
Thank you, David. Trevor.
Thank you. So my name is Trevor. I work for Lightspeed Commerce. For those not familiar with it, for context, it's like Shopify meets Toast. And we're a Canadian company, but we're based globally, really. A big presence in Europe. I've been in the procurement industry for over 20 years. I've worked in public, private, construction, you mentioned it. So I feel like I have a pretty well-rounded view. And what I'm focusing on, or my team is focusing a lot, is automation like everybody else, but efficiency and doing things the smart way, but also doing them right. So I'm excited for this conversation today and to share a bit of my insights.
Thank you, everyone. We'll start with a question that I think may cover every base that we're possibly going to discuss, but let's go for it. Briefly, we'll move down the line and perhaps each of you can tell me one piece of technology that we've relied on heavily in the past that we now consider obsolete or we're moving away from. One piece of technology that's making a huge difference now and where you think the future of procurement technology is going. Doug, let's start with you. You're closest, you draw the short straw.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. So I think from a procurement perspective, I'd really love to see email go away from let's collaborate with email with our suppliers to send out RFQs or to get information back and forth from suppliers. That's my personal dream. I think I've been dreaming that for the 20 years I've been in this space. And we've been trying to do that. I think we're getting to that point where it's obsolete because it's essentially siloed data. I think moving on, because we want to keep moving fast, I think, but the piece of technology that's really interesting today, I think, is orchestration software. So intake data, intake requests from your organization, and then use technology to help rapidly make sure that that process is being executed in a compliant way. That would be my answer for the today technology. And the future of technology, I think, is really, and this is no surprise, but really around AI. I think there's a really incredible future for AI to work together with humans in a way that we amplify the expertise of the people that are working with humans. I don't want to replace people. That's not what we're trying to do. What we want to do is give people essentially a workforce of agents, essentially, that will help you be better, help you make better decisions, amplify the people that are part of your procurement organization.
Thank you, Doug. David, how does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I actually disagree a little bit with Doug, because I think, the world still operates with emails, and with large language models and agentic AI, there's no reason why we have to push people out of their comfort zones. Not to say that it isn't maybe a journey. Sorry if there's resonance and feedback. But I don't think that we can get away from email anytime in the near future, but we also can use AI to automate as much of that email communication as possible to minimize the amount of work that people have to do. My passion is based on a bias. I'm going to admit that up front, right? As a technical person, a software developer, a data scientist, I am passionate about data. I actually co-founded a company 2 years ago with my co-founder, Mike, who was the CPO of Microsoft, just to figure out how do we fix procurement data at scale. And I truly believe that the companies that can figure out how to get their data into a normalized, cleansed, enriched, and contextualized manner will deliver the most value for their stakeholders.
Trevor?
Thank you. Being that I work in a tech company, the one thing I know a lot of our stakeholders appreciate is speed to market. And anytime we're doing any procurement, we try to ensure that our teams are adding value. So one piece of software that I see not performing well going forward, I would say, would be these large, clunky ERP systems that are not agile and are not custom fit for what a lot of organizations need, right? And so I think going forward, there is room for these solutions that come in, some agentic, largely agentic solutions which come in and can be custom made and fit for purpose for what a lot of our organizations are looking for. A large thing is obviously intake, smart intake. I think it really bothers me when stakeholders trying to buy something for 10,000 and they have to go through 15 questions to try and get that order in, right? We're trying to ensure that procurement is a value add and bringing in those types of softwares that can really complement our speed and complement the need for the organization and ensure that procurement is adding value is a way to go going forward. So a lot of agentic AI, but I think it's the responsibility of procurement leaders in how we design that to ensure that machines are doing what machines should do and humans are doing what humans should be doing. So, thank you.
Great, thanks, Trevor. David, sorry.
Can I offer a bit of a counter argument to that one?
Sure.
Because I hear a lot about intake and orchestration. And when I was at AWS and Amazon, I used to hear about the Amazon-like buying experience, right? Everyone was like, I think SAP maybe coined it a while ago. And when you sit back and you think about it, as procurement professionals, do we actually want people to buy more or less, right? Amazon is designed to make you buy more. So I think a lot of the time when we think about intake and orchestration, should we make it frictionless? I don't know. Should we make it have less friction so that it's not as, a messy experience? For sure. But I do think that a lot of the time we kind of over-index towards, let's simplify the process so that's super easy to buy what you need. But sometimes a little bit of healthy friction is a good thing.
So you're arguing for some friction, not over automation.
Healthy friction.
What does healthy friction look like?
Yeah, healthy friction means that if there's a need, it's validated and that it's pressure tested in a way that doesn't disassociate or alienate the requester, but ensures that they are aware that they're being monitored and that their decisions are being taken into account.
Okay, thank you. Doug, anything to add on these?
Yeah, to me, that's compliance, right? It's when it makes sense, having a human in the loop or a manager or somebody that is part of a workflow, for instance, that's making sure that people are making smart decisions because there is a area of spend that is technically compliant or technically like a good decision, but really when you peel back the layers and look at some of the decisions that were made, there were problems. And I think that's just a larger issue that companies that are gigantic have every day. It's how are we spending money? Is it really good for this company? Is it really the right decision? So I think it's a great point, and it's really good to challenge those type of discussions.
It is a good point, and we had a question around this later on. Do you think there's a risk of over automation? Is that possible? How do you control that? And what's the strategy for managing that automation of processes effectively to keep that friction in? David, I'll come to you because you were starting with that point.
I don't know that over automation is the right term, but I do think that there's a risk of oversimplification in terms of if I spontaneously decide that I need to buy something and it's too easy for me to go and buy something. What I've seen in my career is, especially when you look at people that require goods or services to do their job, they tend to have a bit of a hoarder's mindset, right? So making it too easy for an engineer to keep his own little stockpile of, OEM spares in his cupboard is not a good thing. So automating the entire process end to end, where you say, okay, you need a spare, you put in a request, it's approved because it's a critical spare, we're going to ship it to you, it's going to go in your cupboard, knowing that we have another 20 sitting in them or a crib, that's a bad thing. So I do think that there's a fine line between automation or simplification, but making sure that you have that human in the loop sanity check. And sometimes that human in the loop sanity check could be an LLM in the loop, right? It's just that extra little question like, did you check this stock? Or maybe the AI agent goes and checks, do I have that part sitting at another factory somewhere, right? And is it in good enough condition to be reused? So I think that there's ways around maybe the risk of over automation or over simplification.
Great, thank you. Trevor, where do you stand on that from a technology perspective?
I don't think there's a risk of over automation. I think there's a risk if your processes are bad. They are not fixed by automation, right?
Yeah.
So in other words, if somebody's able to buy something and there's no checks and balances for whether we have it in budget or there's approval, that's not necessarily going to change if you're not designing your automation process in a way that addresses that. So I think that I still think that there's the balance between, the core of what we do. It's evolved into this wonderful thing, but at the beginning of it all, procurement was about ensuring fairness in the process and ensuring that we're impartial when we do these decisions. It's evolved into all these other levers and strategic aids, but I think ensuring that there's always a human ideation and a human influence in how we design it, and that it changes to match the pulse of the organization, right? And it's at a boom time and we're buying a certain way, we match that. If things are getting lean and we're changing our procurement strategies, we change our systems to match that as well. So that's really important.
Thank you.
I think that also context is king, right? I don't think that you can over automate an emergency purchase, like period. Like if the factory is down and I need the part as fast as possible, automate the crap out of that, right? That is the one use case that you say, okay, just automate the crap out of it. If it's something that's fungible, like, do I need it to do my job? Probably not. Like, I'll make do without it. There, I don't think that you want to try and automate that entire process too much. You want to focus on the stuff that actually delivers risk mitigation or EBITDA contribution.
Yeah, so I would say, yes, there is. I actually think there is a lot of risk, but I think there's a difference between, autonomous and automation. So I'm a little worried about when we start to hand the keys over to technology so it's fully autonomous. That's just me. I mentioned this before, I believe in human in the loop. And that really, if we have that, we have some level of governance, compliance. We're making sure that we're respecting, if we're at the plant level, what's going on for that particular production line, the rules and obligations that are respective to that industry. So if we're in aerospace and defense, we have to make sure that we have compliance to, federal laws, for instance, if you're in the US, and other things with secrecy and other elements. So there's a lot of nuance in this question. And there's a lot of risk with technology if we continue the path forward with the growth of LLMs and how fast they're really moving forward. Keeping up with this technology is going to be a real challenge for not only providers like Ivalua, but also the people that are in this room. what are we unleashing on our processes in our companies? We have to be really mindful of that. And that's why I believe things like compliance, governance are really critical when it comes to how we look at technology. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you. You've all talked about human in the loop. By automating those methodical tasks and those repetitive tasks, how are you enabling a smaller team to complete the same strategic work of a larger team? And following from that, where does the benefit come from that for the procurement function of the team and the organization more broadly? Trevor, I'll start with you down the end there.
Thank you. That's a good question, because I think you have to have a good understanding on the areas where you can make the most impact. Like, right, I'll use my team as an example. I think we worked with a consulting firm, Valorant. What we did was we ran a pretty comprehensive readiness assessment to sort of identify areas where automation would make the most impact, right? And then we began to sort of custom build a procure-to-pay solution that answers those questions. So a really good understanding of the quality of the data you have in your organization, where you can automate and make the most impact, all right, and making a good plan and then executing on it. So I think that's a really key importance. A lot of people are sort of rushing to test in this market where everybody's just testing and buying what they can. But I think it's good to take a step back and assess what you have a really good plan for execution, and then proceed to do as much.
Great. David, you don't want to remove people. You said that at the start. Well, what's your point?
So, I mean, this is not a new concept, right? RPA has been around for a long time. And if you think about procurement, usually the lowest hanging fruit historically has been in like shared services, procurement operations, right? Peer-to-peer compliance checks, that kind of stuff, where you have very deterministic rules and you can do automation through pure RPA. And now with LLMs and generative AI, I feel like the fungibility of the problem solving is expanding. So you have LLMs that can now contextualize, right? You have LLMs that can now infer. And that means that the flexibility in terms of what you can automate is expanding. But now we're starting to also get into the realm of more strategic activities, where LLMs are doing more strategic tasks like research online. Like, that becomes pretty dangerous, because we all know that AI is writing a lot of the articles that are out there, and it's not necessarily predicated on fact. And so you have, a bit of a garbage in, garbage out situation. So the way that we look at it, or the way I look at it, is a risk assessment. You do a blast, so you understand what is the blast radius, right? So if this goes wrong, I always say, if this goes wrong, will I go to jail? Will I get fired? Or will I get yelled at, right? Those kind of my 3 risk thresholds. If I'm going to go to jail, then probably let's talk about something else, right? If I'm going to get fired, let's do a lot of thinking. If I'm going to get yelled at, I've got a pretty thick skin. Like, I could probably take that. So I think it's all about risk assessment and understanding if and when something goes wrong, what is the blast radius?
Okay, thank you. Doug.
Yeah, so I totally appreciate the comments so far. I think this is a really interesting conversation. For me, the way that we build our teams in the future is going to fundamentally change. We really think about procurement people as sometimes being a subject matter expert. Like, if you look at your category managers, for instance, they're really specialized in a few specific areas. That knowledge actually is going to fundamentally change in how it's used. So now, from my perspective, the way I look at this is you will have a procurement person, maybe many of them, and that's great. I hope I want to see procurement thrive and continue to grow and build. I think everybody's rock stars here, and I want to see that. Now, what's going to happen is I think you'll see more and more essentially help for your procurement people. So as these agents that, like, for example, you'll have access to an Ivalua. I'm not trying to sell you on Ivalua. I'm just saying this is the future, is you will actually have agents that help and support you through processes. So you don't necessarily have to stop and take a beat to go ask a question of somebody that is maybe in a different time zone than you. You'll have that access through an agent. It may not be perfect all the time, but it may follow, at the very least, your rules and policies and compliance and strategies that you have guided within your platform. The other thing to think about is how it affects the way you actually manage your spend as an organization. So because you'll have not only a human that's part of a loop of agents, or agents part of the human process and decision, that will help you actually find maybe data that you didn't know you had in the system before, or you weren't taking advantage of or leveraging at the right time and place. It also helps you actually manage and address more spend. That is only a benefit to your organization, and also, I think, to people that are actually embracing AI and this advanced technology. It's going to really help you in your career. I think it was Mark Cuban. I can't remember who actually coined this or said this, but the people that are really going to succeed in the future are the people that are actually embracing the technology and thinking about it now. How do we, as procurement professionals, and I consider myself still a procurement professional to this day, leverage this technology to advance our work? How do we use it to set the vision for procurement? Now, we were gifted. I think it's awful what's happening in the world today. It was awful that we went through COVID crisis, the supply chain crisis that followed that, but it's really gifted procurement kind of a seat at the table. And we have this opportunity, I think, to take this technology and run with it and really make procurement that much more valuable to our organizations.
Great, thank you. Changing tack slightly, Trevor, I want to come to you. We talked about risk a little. Obviously, as we add more layers of technology, the risk can increase. How do we protect the supply chain and the business from potential cyber attacks and from the potential risk that comes from increased use of technology?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the way I look at it is because the risks naturally changes, right? It becomes more dynamic with the way things are. But it's like, what role do we play, and what role can procurement play in sort of mobilizing security, mobilizing IT, and mobilizing our stakeholders in terms of responding faster, right? Like, there's a role that we play, even with automation and with the data sets we have, to not only monitor. In the past, it used to be once you onboard a vendor, you monitor them there for the risk, you evaluate them for that, and it almost becomes like back of mind. But now we're able to, with automation, have a continuous assessment and monitoring of risk. And not only that, we're able to then have procurement at the seat, mobilizing the key stakeholders in how quickly we respond to that. The risk type changes, but how we respond to it and act on it is what we can play a role in doing, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I look at the area of risk as far as that's concerned, procurement and supply chain is concerned. Right?
Thank you. Doug, how do you approach risk?
Yeah, it's definitely not my area of expertise when we start talking about cybersecurity, but I do have some thoughts. I typically deal with companies that have pretty complex technology stacks. So a lot of ERPs, or sometimes different ERPs, different systems. They do, a lot of our customers have gone through acquisitions. So it's pretty complex technology ecosystem. And I think that's a scary place to live in the future. Maybe it was last week, Anthropic, there was news about Anthropic's, I think it's Mythos is the name of the model that was kind of banned for release because there was too much risk for using it for nefarious purposes, right? For hacking and such. That's a pretty scary future that we potentially live in. And I think, there's a few things that I would suggest to companies is to look at especially since we're all procurement people here for the most part, I think, look at your procurement ecosystem and try to simplify that. Try to make your ecosystem as easy and manageable as possible. And yes, I am a source to pay provider, so I may be a little biased here, but having one platform that can help simplifies your IT ecosystem. The other piece of this is looking at the individual processes that we'll see when you look at things like invoicing, right? It's very common for large companies like some that are on the stage that may have a company send in fraudulent invoices, for instance. Having technology in place that can identify that or flag it, and obviously that's a lot of AI that's coming and can be useful in those type of scenarios, can help to rapidly identify those kind of cybersecurity threats or fraud threats that can seriously harm a company. So technology can also hurt us, but it can also help us if we do it the right way. But I would strongly recommend that everybody that's in procurement in online and here today, start to talk with your IT teams internally about how you plan for your technology evolution, right? think about what these risks are. How do we build a system that we can use AI, make sure we have good quality data, but also help to prevent some of these things that are coming our way in the future.
Thank you. On the subject of, I guess, mitigating risk, real-time analysis, obviously hugely important to be able to shift quickly. Do you think that's one of the biggest benefits of some of the technologies we're employing, that ability to be flexible and to react to an increasingly volatile environment? David?
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, as a technical person, I get a little anxious about the way we talk about agents and software and technology, because at the end of the day, it's just software, right? Sure. But the reality is that right now, effectively, we all have access to a theoretical infinite amount of junior procurement professionals with access to Google. Right? That's how we should think about agents, so at its most simplistic form, right? But the reality is that over time, as we build up our knowledge database, those professionals become more and more experienced, make better and better decisions, and the capabilities expand. This means that the things that previously prevented us from converting data into insights, right, which typically was bandwidth, that's going away. So our ability to respond faster is now exponentially greater than it was 2 years ago, and 2 years from now, it's going to be even exponentially greater. I think what we're going to run into is we're going to run into the problem of separating the signal from the noise, right? Because if you're not careful, you're going to get flooded, and you're going to get inundated with all the things that could possibly go wrong, and you're not going to be able to figure out which one should I respond to. So we have to be careful with this very powerful tool that we don't just over-index and say, you know what, we're going to throw an agent at everything, get as many signals as possible without some type of buffering layer to contextualize that, and not just tell me like everything that's going on, but make sure that you're only telling me the stuff that I should care about right now, and maybe something that I should care about in 2 weeks.
So how do we mitigate that? What does that buffer layer look like?
I mean, it's at the end of the day, I think the challenge is contextualization within your industry and within your company, right? So setting up an agent or setting up a tool that's monitoring signals and correlating those signals with internal data. So I don't know, raw material index with, index escalators and contracts, right? Making sure that when you set those up, that you're setting them up in a way that's thoughtful and mindful, and that you're integrating them in a way that it's not triggering constantly, and constantly like, oh, it's going up 10, it's going down 5%, and you're just like inundated with all of these different changes. Focus on the 20% that matters, and don't try and boil the ocean.
Okay, thank you. That's why it's important to have a plan that's built in tandem, obviously, with our risk teams in security and tech and any other key stakeholder. And it's really important for procurement to play a role in the response plan and mobilizing that and making sure that, because I find in many organizations there is a void whenever there is any risk incident and we have to then respond. So procurement being the one that can bring people and mobilize. It's just another example of how this profession can affect influence within an organization and prove to be a key player. And like automation will help that a lot.
Great. Doug, do you want to?
Yeah, I think these guys really said amazing things, and it's absolutely true in my opinion. I think you have the possibility with technology today to do a lot of real-time monitoring. Like it's there. If you don't have access to it today, our booth is over there. Come talk to us. But I think when we're talking about procurement, it's really about targeting the core things that matter most, and typically that's like core direct material spend or something like that, where real-time information is really critical, right? So you don't have to do this for, office equipment or stuff like that. You don't need that level of data or real-time access for that type of spend. So what do you do when you have issues, right? You want to make sure that you are aware of the information that's out there, and then you need to be able to quickly identify what is going on and respond. So technology will help. AI will help with this. If it's not helping you today, it's not going to take long for you to start using it. It's right around the corner for you if you haven't started to embrace into this. I think it's really important to look at various threads of data as well. So not only it's market indices, it's also maybe risk data from like third-party data providers. I'm not going to name names. but maybe something about supplier health, especially in the dynamic world that we live in today. I remember a few years ago, I was hosting a session, and one of our customers was speaking with me, and it was during the Russia-Ukraine conflict, just at the beginning, and nickel prices were going crazy. And the person I was speaking with was working for a steel manufacturer at the time that made products. And so nickel was literally their lifeblood. They used it in everything that they made. And the CEO was calling him every like 20 minutes to see what was happening. These are the type of decisions that procurement has to ultimately be a part of. And procurement is, I think, really important here because it's, you're combining talking with engineering, C-level execs, and everybody else, and plus your supplier networks, which are essentially an extension of your enterprise, to make really good decisions. So access the information is critical. Platforms can help, procurement platforms can help, and AI will certainly be a big part of that as well to help you highlight what is absolutely critical and summarize things for you in a very concise way.
Great. So on that, and without repeating ourselves too much at the beginning, what do we see the next 5 years of procurement technology looking like? Bear in mind we only have 9 minutes left, so that's probably a big loaded question, but what stands out for you? What's on your radar? And I suppose what big piece of tech do you think that will really make the difference? Trevor, I'm going to start with you down the end there.
So, and that's a really good question. I'll speak about my experience because I think,
Sure.
So I think about a year or two ago, we're in the brink of like investing in a procure to pay tool. And obviously, as we saw more of this AI solutions coming to the forefront, we took a step back. And what we did was we started to analyze our ecosystem to understand the areas of opportunity while at the same time looking at different systems that are out there. So I think that, and this will depend largely on what your organization is in, the risk appetite. There's a lot that goes into it. But for us, we are in the process of implementing a tool, Astra, with Valorant, where it has been custom made to a lot of what we need and answering a lot of those automated solutions, which I think reasonably balance human influence and then tasks that should be done by agentic models. So we have probably 5x'd our growth, but we haven't had to add anybody. Now, there's no CFO who doesn't like to hear that. There's no leader who doesn't like to hear that, especially if the ROI writes itself, right? I'm like, we've had all this growth. Ironically, with a lot of people purchasing agentic solutions or AI solutions, but that's meant a heavy load on our procurement teams. But because we've been smart enough to do diligent work and invest in the right tool, we're able to handle that growth without adding extra resources. I'm one of those people who think that it's our responsibility as leaders to choose the right way our organizations grow and use AI. Otherwise, we may inevitably have to have the question on whether we need all the resources. If you don't train your people to adjust and utilize AI the right way, there may be decisions you have to make around ultimately reducing the size of your teams, right? So if it's used the right way, I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm optimistic about the tool we've invested in, and I look forward in a year from now coming here and continuing to talk about some of the wonderful work we're doing.
Great, let's do it. Moving down the line, David.
Yeah, interest in time, I'll be quick, but I look at the world through two lenses. I think of enterprise AI and I think of end user AI, right? And I think what's really exciting right now is that the end user AI that's available to us through tools like Anthropic Cowork and all of these things are definitely going to fundamentally shift the way that knowledge workers work. So what I would say is, I don't know what the world is going to look like 2 years from now, let alone 5 years from now. But I think in terms of the types of people that we want to be hiring, these are people that are not afraid to try new tools, people that are not afraid to experiment. We've got folks in our procurement organization that will use like Claude Code to write software, to push our IT department to say, look, this doesn't need to take 6 weeks to do a proof of concept. We can do it in a weekend, right? Having someone that has that digital fluency, I think is going to be key, and making sure that we're constantly pressure testing. Is this an enterprise AI solution that we need to make a significant amount of thought around and like we really have to consider the investment and the risk? Or is this just an end user piece of software that helps me do my job more efficiently? And there we should just figure out how to adopt it as fast as possible.
Great. Doug, you started us off. I'll let you have the final word.
Yeah, it's a scary place to be. I think, I do really agree with what both of these gentlemen said. I think my perspective is I don't know where we're going to be in 5 years. I have no idea where we're going to be in 24 months. I'm not really sure where we'll be in 12 months, to be honest. I have an idea. My idea is you'll start to see some organizations that, from a technology perspective are really progressive. But frankly, technology, where we are with AI right now, it's progressing so fast. Everybody is trying to understand the implications and trying to keep up. And solution providers are trying to pave the way and trying to give our customers and give our prospective customers something they can work with. For me, procurement is going to fundamentally change, but I'm hoping it's not I don't want to replace people. That's not my mission. That's not what I set out to do 20 years ago. I set out to try to make this an effective way to help companies and people do their job better and faster and drive value. That was the kind of the math for me when I was trying to figure out where my spot in the world would be. And I really do see, certainly in the near future, I see a path where we'll see technology that will help you, not replace your staff, but actually just drive more value for the company. But to do that, it's not about replacing people. It's about making sure, as David said, finding the right people that you can work with that understand the business process, the regional differences for your company, the things that will help you be compliant, that understand how important data is to execution of these processes. So it's really going to take a team to do that. And I think having the right technology and technology partners is really important. But at the end of the day, it's the people in this room that are going to have the vision. You have to have a vision that will support your organization and drive it forward. And you have a real chance to have a seat at the table, like at the executive level, and really drive home, this is the path we need to take. Because it is possible that you will have people that are essentially hybrid with agents that will empower them to do much more with less. So they can expand the value that you as procurement, as an organization, are delivering to your organization. Not only savings, cost avoidance, risk avoidance, making sure that you have a resilient supply chain. That's the future we have. And AI will be a difference maker there. But in order to make that happen, you have to be the driver of that.
Let's add one thing, 10 seconds.
Go for it, yeah.
So you need to hire translators. You need to hire translators that can understand the business processes, but also have enough of an understanding of what the technology is and what it's capable of, that they can bridge between the requirements and the business value. Because today, I think that's the biggest gap that I see in procurement organizations. I'll leave it there.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you. That's all the questions from me. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. We've got a couple of minutes. Do we have any questions out on the floor? Hands up if you want to ask the panel anything. Yep, one down the front here. Go for it. We've got a mic coming your way. You need to just make sure you hold it closely. Sounds a bit challenging.
No, it's okay, I got you. One question that a lot of our customers are facing is around kind of the balance from procurement for the commoditization and agentic AI versus the kind of customized relationships they have with their suppliers and how they're going to balance that and how they're trying to segment the tools between those two things, right? Getting an order for a widget that anyone could provide is necessarily different than a vendor who's custom building products with you or someone you're in a longer term relationship. Do you envision the relationships and the tools that you're using kind of being broken along those two streams?
I'm going to open that to the panel. Who wants to jump in?
I can tell you my perspective. I tend to agree with Dr. Eloise Epstein in that I think what we have is we have a lot of sunk cost and we have a lot of investment in enterprise software. And we're not going to change that anytime soon. So I think that the highest ROI is going to be the technologies that can bridge between software solutions that are solving business problems, right? So looking at the business capabilities and understanding this piece of software here and this piece of software here, if they could talk to each other better, we could deliver more value. Now, full suite providers are going to tell you that you can replace everything with one suite, but we all know that the lift and shift cost is huge, right? There's a lot of barrier to entry there. So I think it's going to be opportunistic. If Ivalua comes out with a cool tool that adds a lot of value and you're already in their ecosystem or you're making a decision to go on board with them, partner with them. If you're sunk in with someone whose name sounds like PAP, begins with an S, then you probably want to look at other solutions that can drive value across the modules without having to rely on that sunk cost that you have.
Maybe I can. Oh,
So I work in tech in an industry that's more demanding and there's a lot more pressure for savings. So my answer would be a little bit different. If those vendors who you have relationships with are not responding enough to the change that is in the marketplace, you have to do what's best as far as your organization is concerned, short term and long term. The change is so rapid. There's no chance for people to stay too far behind. You have to make these decisions. Sometimes you have these big clunky vendors who are not as flexible to the rapidly changing landscape in how we consume goods and how we purchase things. And so ultimately you have to do the right research and go with the vendor who best meets your needs for the future.
Just one more thing. Rapid prototype. Rapid prototype is the name of the game, especially with technology nowadays. Pay the bills and delight the customer. If you can't prove that you can pay the bills, walk away, right? Once you pay the bills, then you figure out how do we delight the customer, make the user experience better. But without that proof of concept showing that there's real tangible value, you're never going to get the support and the budget required to go further.
Doug. Yeah, I was going to say, I think, to me, it sounded like this was really two different type of approaches from a category strategy perspective, if I understood the question right. So for me, I think any system that is kind of worth the price to pay should enable you and empower you to really approach each with various strategies. So if you have a category strategy provider that's doing powdered metals for you, and you have that's a very strategic relationship for that direct material component, you're going to have a very close relationship with that supplier. Your process should totally reflect that. And so as a human in the loop advocate, when it comes to AI, I would approach that with a very kind of human-centric process. Now, if you're dealing with categories that are more commoditized, for instance, kind of off the shelf, very predictable volumes or whatever the case may be, that's maybe a more automated approach. So that is still, you want governance over both. And the system that whoever it is setting, is actually using this as part of their procurement process should be able to govern that, make sure that you're monitoring KPI or analytics that are associated with that. That's just part of the game, right? If you can't do that today, then that's a problem. And if you can't do that soon, that's also a problem. So those are the kind of conversations that you have to be having, is how do we use automation in a way that's smart? You don't want to just automate to automate, because there's risk there. You really have to kind of pull back the leaves, pull back the onion, and the layers of the onion, I should say, and make sure that your process makes sense going forward.
Great. Thank you. Sadly, and I do mean sadly, it's been a great panel. That's all we've got time for. Please, everyone, join me in thanking our panelists again.